So today we are talking about Crestview, Florida schools and what parents need to know before moving here. We're going to talk about hopefully as much of the 2026, 2027. We're going to go through schools from Southside Primary all the way through Crestview High School. And we're also talking about our elementary and middle schools, also the new school, Pineview, and then Richbourg, and also some of the nearby schools like Baker. I'm Tanya Rivera. On this channel, we talk about what it's really like to live, work, raise a family, and buy a home here in Northwest Florida. I'm not here to choose a school for you because of every child, every family is completely different. I am just here to help you understand the choices, the numbers, the local details that do not always make it onto, those websites that we all look at. Let's start with the big picture. So going into this school year for 2026, 2027 right here in Okaloosa County, it is rated an A school district in Florida's complete school accountability rankings. Okaloosa came in 15th out of 67 county districts. When this district looks specifically at the percentage of students performing on grade level, it ranked 8th in the state. So those are kind of like two different ways at looking at performance, which is why you may hear both of those numbers around town. The 15th place rankings uses the whole state formula, the achievement, learning, gains, talking about graduation, acceleration, and the process of students who need the most support. The 8th place ranking, I would say that it's more of like a level proficiency. So Okaloosa is, also one of the 3 Florida districts that has earned an A every year, since I would say that those grades have been issued since 2014. I'd have to make sure that everything there is correct, but that is one thing that we can really, really talk about. The 2026 results, 23 district schools, that's 23 earned A's. 10 earned B's, 4 of those earned C's, and 89% earned an A or a B. That is a strong countywide picture. But let me give you the local part that matters when you are house hunting. The word Crestview in the mailing address does not tell you the school by itself. Crestview has grown a lot, and Pineview opened recently, so they just started their school year in this August. So some attendance areas definitely changed. So when you narrow down your home search, to an actual address, put that address into the Okaloosa School District locator. That's going to give you just that little one extra step. So where it saves you big surprises later because of, even some realtors don't know which school that they go to. So let's talk about the, youngest school, the ones for the youngest, the tiny ones. Let's talk about Southside Primary School. This is somewhere where my daughter attended. Southside Primary is led by Principal Amy Bowles. She serves pre-K all the way through 2nd grade. Now, Southside is right in the heart of Crestview. It is built around those early years whenever children are learning how to be students as much as they are learning how to read and do math. This school offers a VPK program and Tiger Care. It's got like a before and after school programs so where families can also find literacy resources, military family support, classroom library access, and school community events. It also had a speech program that I know that my daughter really enjoyed whenever she went to Southside. Now, Southside doesn't really receive like an A through an F kind of that school grade that sometimes does confuse people who are new to this area whenever they start asking. And there's nothing wrong with schools, who does not get that grade. It just simply does not meet one of those Florida, testing standards where, that starts in 3rd grade and Southside ends at 2nd. So What it does have is that BPK in the classrooms. So BPK classrooms have also been among the Okaloosa, programs receiving strong state designations. And as far as sports, guys, these little learners, they're looking more at like the physical education, movement, wellness, and maybe some family activities, like they've got a field day. It's not really like a true competitive sports schedule at that school. So moving into some of the elementary schools. So let's start on the west side of Crestview, the ones that's more closer to the base, Antioch Elementary. This is where Susan Gearing is the principal. Now, Antioch earned an A in 2024, 2025, and 2026. 83% of the students were on grade level in math. I'd say 74% in English, language arts, and 69% in science. Antioch is home of the Aviators, and one of its better known student activities is the running club that the kids love so much. It also offers childcare, physical education, a media center. It offers classroom libraries, resources, PTO if you want to get involved, a school advisory opportunities that's there, plus wellness and support for those military families. Now, when parents ask whether an elementary schools have sports, Antioch is a good example of what that usually means at this point. So where they have started that running club, it's an organized and active, but elementary activities are not the same as like middle schools or, high schools, but they do have kids who are getting moving, learning that teamwork, getting involved without that full middle school competition schedule yet. So now let's talk about a school that I attended whenever I was younger, Walker Elementary. Now, this school is led by none other than Brittany Young. She would say moved Walker from a B school in 2024 to an A school in 2025, and it did keep that A rating for 2026 on those achievement numbers. We're 70% in English, language arts, 77% in math, and 75% in science. So Walker offers childcare, they offer physical education, they've got guidance counselors, they've got a media center and Title I support. They've got like the student ambassador program. So it's also worth knowing about all of those things that a school can give to their children, so where that they can learn and get into that practice of learning leadership and really learn to represent their school well. You may see like an athletic section on Walker's website, but at the elementary level, the exact same activities can change from year to year. So I think they're even talking about doing flag football at Walker this year. But like I said, it does change from year to year. So you'll have to see what is running this semester. So now let's talk about Northwood Elementary. Northwood is led by Principal Amy Lewis. She improved Northwood from a B to an A school in 2026. Now, Northwood does offer that Title I support. They have childcare, a media center, resources for families of students with autism, and for any kind of military family services. It also participates in this kindergarten kickstart, which it kind of helps, incoming kindergartner students get, acclimated with the campus before they start that first full school day, which I couldn't love more. So they also have these practical programs that, because of a school ranking, will never show you the moment a nervous 5-year-old walks and meets their teachers, and then the adult realizes like, okay, I can do this. And then usually it's the parents that need the reassurance just as much as the child. So having those programs in place is something that I genuinely love for Northwood. Now, let's head over to, I'd say, the east side of town, and let's talk about Riverside Elementary. Now, this principal Alice LaVictoria. And Riverside, she moved it from a B to an A in 2026. Now, Riverside offers that Title I services in reading, and they've got some media resources. They do have a good PTO and school advisory council. And they're so super involved with military family support and an on-campus boys and girls program. The Boys and Girls Club option is one of those details that really helps those working parents who may care just about that after school and that program atmosphere more than the grades. And then here, they're right there by that Shoal River Middle School, and it's set on that Redstone Avenue in Crestview. So if you live in those surrounding neighborhoods, you already know what the mornings and afternoons look like because of walkers, bicycles, crossing guards, buses, and that car line. They all share that little stretch right there. But a lot of the neighborhood kids really try to walk to Riverside, and Riverside really embraces that by taking part in that National Walk to School Day. So that's fun. So if you're looking at a house in that area, do not just measure the distance on your phone. Drive on that East Redstone during arrival and dismissal and see that rhythm for yourself. And that will tell you more than what a map ever could. So, and you can see if your kids could walk to that school. So now let's move a little bit further north and let's talk about Bob Sikes Elementary. Now, this school is led by Lauren Seegers. Now, the school did earn a B in 2026 and has held a B for the past 3 accountable years. Its strongest 2026 testing subject was math at 63%. Bob Sikes Title I support literacy programs. They've got classroom and media center resources. They have this technology resources, and they have, Coach Luna with the physical education there. They do have the guidance counselors on campus, childcare, PTO. They've got the, advisory council involvement that takes place at this school. And they really, really challenge families to get involved with reading events. This is why I keep saying that the real story of Crestview Schools is bigger than what a letter tells you. The letter just only tells you a part of the picture. But whenever you start talking about childcare, literacy, support that they get, the leadership, family involvement in a school, that is how a child really connects to the campus, that you want to be involved in. So now let's talk about one of the newest schools to Crestview that opened up this year, August of 2026, because it is such a big change for Crestview families moving into this school year. Pineview opened in August this year on Inzer Road, and as a brand new school that has kindergarten through that 8th grade campus, Dr. Donna Kelly is the principal. Because of Pineview is in its first year, it really doesn't have that grade there. This is more for like multi-year is what they have that grade. So nothing to go off of on the school, no championships yet, but man, is that campus beautiful. A large school, and you just, can't say more about that. Now, some of the things that Pineview does offer is like a K through 8th grade model, which means that children in the attendance can stay on campus from kindergarten all the way up through 8th grade. The school list, it's got a daycare, it's got military family resources. It talks about mental health and wellness support for middle schoolers. It's got that, information for the middle schoolers. And it does have some athletic programs that are starting to take shape, like cheerleading, dance, and football, are some of the sports that they are running right now. Now, there is something that is very exciting about being part of a brand new school is the first students and families, they help create that atmosphere, those traditions, the things that people are going to be talking about for years. That's what these kids are bringing to the school this year. They're bringing like the enrollment, they're bringing like what things that they want to do at the school. So I'm super excited to see where Pineview goes this year and what options that they're going to bring to the table. Now, for generations of Crestview families, middle school has meant Davidson or Shoal River. Depending on which side of town that you live on, that's really going to decide which school that you go to. Now, Davidson is led by Principal Laura King. Davidson has earned an A both 2025 and 2026. And one number that really stands out is the 90